Imagine the sheer, chaotic, suffocating white noise of London. You know the sound, right? Cars, sirens, millions of people. And then just imagine it's suddenly gone. Like someone pulled the plug. Replaced by a Mediterranean silence so profound, so intensely heavy that it actually makes your ears ring. I remember standing there in this stark, whitewashed room, gripping a canvas duffel bag, and my hands, they just felt completely empty.
So, what actually happens when a whole year of your life is simply gone? You'd think I'd be looking at those radiant, postcard perfect images of Greece, but for me, they simply weren't there. When I closed my eyes, I didn't see the sparkling Aegean Sea. No, I saw a flickering neon matrix of hospital monitors. I could literally smell the sharp, sterile scent of antiseptic. I was staring into this yawning, horrifying void where 12 whole months of my life used to be. Retrograde amnesia. It's such a neat, sterile, clinical term, isn't it? The doctors tossed it around after my car crash on that rainy London evening. But let me tell you, that definition, it completely fails to capture the reality of it. It doesn't capture the feeling of holding a shattered mirror, staring at a reflection of a successful photography career that you have absolutely zero memory of building. It completely misses the deep, aching grief for a past you can't even articulate. To survive that feeling, I knew I had to replace the flickering hospital monitors and the sterile antiseptic of London with something real. I needed the deep, liquid cobalt of the sea, the biting salty wind, and the rough, ancient stone of Okia Santorini. It was an overwhelming sensory shock, for sure, but it was also a desperately necessary relief. I had to leave behind the cold, digital databases of a life I didn't recognize and just plunge into a bright, tactile analog reality just so I could breathe. Which brings us to chapter 1 of this new life, the sanctuary of pause. This place basically became my anchor. I couldn't trust my own mind, right? So I had to trust my hands. I threw myself into the physical, everyday rhythm of being a sanctuary volunteer, sweeping the rough limestone floors, scrubbing out the plastic litter pans, wiping down the feeding stations over and over. I used these repetitive menial tasks to literally tether myself to the present moment, because everything else in my head was just a massive blur of static. There was this one cat, Omicron. He was a blind, charcoal gray cat, and holding him, wow, his rhythmic purr vibrated through my hands like a steady heartbeat. A heartbeat that didn't demand a resume or a backstory. He was completely blind, yet he knew exactly where he was in the world. He didn't need to see the horizon to trust that the ground would hold him. And sitting there on the dusty limestone, it hit me. I needed to learn how to do exactly the same thing. But, as you probably know, trauma rarely leaves you in peace for long. Moving into chapter 2, the blue outline, I reached into my denim jacket pocket one afternoon, and my fingers brushed against a vintage postcard. Finding it felt like a literal block of ice pressing directly against my ribs. My hands shook so badly the next morning I could barely pour water. It was this sudden, frantic shift in my internal weather, yanking me violently out of the present and dragging me right back to the very edge of the void. I stared at this heavy cardstock, and right there in the corner, a microscopic watermarked logo. It was a sleek, minimalist design of interlocking lines. Actually, it looked exactly like a corporate structural blueprint. This wasn't just some random piece of tourist junk. It was a ghost from my demolished life calling my name. It felt perfectly engineered to pull me back into the dark. In an instant, the silent horizon of my mind just cracked wide open. The absolute terror washed over me that Oya, this beautiful, sun-drenched sanctuary I'd found, might not be a refuge at all. It felt like an elaborate, staged trap, and the curtains had just been yanked back to show me that I was still being watched. Suddenly, every single shadow in the alleyways felt entirely intentional. And right in the middle of this panic, I met Leo. This rugged stranger who somehow seemed to see right through my fractured facade. He said something that hit me with the force of a physical blow. He talked about how the sea doesn't actually delete anything, it just encrypts it in rock. He looked at me and said that sometimes the things we are searching for aren't hidden in the sweeping views. Sometimes they are buried right beneath our feet. He was basically telling me that my past wasn't gone. It was just hidden, waiting for me to excavate it. By the time we hit chapter 8, the blueprint of love, standing there with Leo, the walls in my mind finally broke. I had a violent physical reaction, like this sharp, needle-like pain flaring right behind my temples. His presence, his steady voice,
Even the exact way the harsh sunlight bounced off his camera lens, it all acted as a massive trigger. The locked doors in my head blew completely off their hinges, and fragments of that rainy London car crash violently surfaced into my conscious mind.
Suddenly, the fractured puzzle of my memory frantically pieced itself together. It all rushed back. 1 hour ago, the echoing concrete garage and the terrifying confrontation. 30 minutes ago, hiding the digital backup, the evidence. 10 minutes ago, running for my life into the freezing rain. 0 minutes, the crash. The horrifying truth wasn't just that I was in a terrible accident. The truth was that the crash was absolutely no accident at all. I was fleeing my own husband, an elite architect who wanted to erase me from the picture entirely. I vividly relived his precise, controlling voice echoing in my head. He treated my life, my art, and my absolute freedom like a bad structural drawing that he could just casually delete and draft over. He believed he owned my perspective, my photography, my very existence. He didn't just want to control my work, he wanted to own the entire narrative of who I was.
The architecture of my past wasn't a home. It was a literal war zone. But remembering the awful truth, it actually gave me my power back. I suddenly realized exactly where I had hidden the primary digital backup. I had embedded that little orange shockproof hard drive deep inside the thick stone walls of the cat sanctuary, right here in Oya. I hid it in the one place totally invisible to his massive corporate surveillance network. I had protected myself, even when I couldn't remember doing it. So here we are, Chapter 10, The Golden Horizon. The shadow of the architect's house had finally fallen away. I was walking side by side with Leo, the man who had patiently protected my memory while I was completely incapable of doing it myself. We were walking back to the ruins of Oya Castle, and that heavy orange hard drive was resting safely in my pocket. And honestly, it was weighing me down in the absolute best, most grounding possible way. Reclaiming the horizon wasn't just a metaphor. It meant I finally erased the shadow of his cage. I recovered the hard drive, yes, but more importantly, I fully embraced the tactile, messy analog truth of Santorini. That whole year of running, officially over. I stopped hiding from the fractured mirror of my mind because, for the first time, I finally had all the pieces to put it back together. I simply didn't need to run anymore. Standing there at the castle ruins, right under this eternal, defiant sunset, I looked down at Omicron. He was just vibrating with that deep, rhythmic purr of his, completely trusting the warm stone beneath him. It's such a powerful reminder that true healing isn't about perfectly remembering every single thing you've lost. True healing is learning to trust the solid ground beneath your paws in the present moment, even if you couldn't see the dark, twisted path that brought you there. So, I'll leave you with this. If the sea truly encrypts our deepest secrets and traumas on stone, preserving them rather than just washing them away, what will you choose to build on your own solid ground once the storm has finally passed? How do you rebuild your identity when the blueprints of your past are totally destroyed? Think about that as you navigate your own horizons. Thank you so much for walking this path with me on today's Explainer, and whatever happens, keep seeking the truth beneath your feet.